like 300 people here on Saturday night.
Wow.
You had 300 people here?
Yeah, for the rationalist solstice after party.
Oh my god.
I know. All my friends were here.
That was on Sunday?
It was on Saturday night.
Wow.
Yeah, I went to sleep at 8 p.m., so I was not here. I've been up since 4 when we did it last morning.
Yeah. I don't think I sleep.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, room. Hello, internet. So, if you haven't been here before, the way this works is we sit and discuss in the room, and also everything that goes through a microphone goes out onto the internet. So y'all are not mic'd, which means you can ask your spiciest questions, and no one on the internet will hear them. And Zachary will repeat them as he sees fit. He'll either add or decrease the spice level and then repeat them. A couple of things that are coming up this week. On Thursday, Michael Taft is back for Deconstructing Yourself. We were all on retreat last week. We're back this week. And on Friday, we have something very special. We've never done this at Alembic before. It's called Soft Landing. And it is going to be quadraphonic ambient drone music that is designed to create and help enhance a meditative state of mind. That event goes from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. So it's an all-night event.
Wow.
Yeah, it's our first all-night event. It's to commemorate the solstice. So the actual solstice is on Thursday, and the solstice is at, I believe, like 7:32 p.m. on Thursday, which means we'll just be ending the meditation at the time of solstice. And we're having a little solstice potluck on Thursday to commemorate that. Mm-hmm. And then in celebration of the solstice, we're doing our first all-night event on Friday. So if you're not doing anything on Friday and feel like laying around on the floor and meditating like literally all night, you're in the right place. And I think that is all. We will not meet next week or the week after.
That's right.
It's Christmas and then New Year's. Yeah. So we'll be back on the 8th.
Exactly.
Here. Okay. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Yeah. Well, we should sit for a while. So let's sit for a while. Where's the whacker?
It's in the bowl.
Oh, okay, good. So take some time to settle into your body and to frame your posture, however it is that you're sitting, in a way that feels upright and energetic, but also comfortable and relaxed enough to be able to sit there in principle indefinitely, right? We're not going to be sitting indefinitely, but in particular, to notice the places where there's some sort of tension or twist or extra effort, and see if you can, just by attending to them, get a hint from your body about how to let go of that tension or that twist or that discomfort. And that's an activity that you can renew anytime you're aware in the middle of sitting too, is to notice the way in which bodies, certainly my body, moves around tension and tends to, when I'm not paying attention to them, tends to flex, tends to tighten up in certain specific places that are really, really kind of my own, right? For me, it has something to do with the twist in my right hip, and how to address it and be friends with it, right? But everybody's got their own. It can also help in that regard to use the breath as a kind of focal point and also mechanism for bringing relaxation to the body. With perhaps a little extra effort on the out breath, maybe a little extra attention to the out breath, and then complete release of tension on the in breath. It has this quality of kind of a instant massage. And again, everyone's got a place where they breathe to and from. You don't have to change that. Just give it your attention. Give it this subtle effort, and watch what happens. as your mind starts to settle. When the opportunity arises to really attend to your experience, when you're thinking, at least briefly, lets go, and allows your attention to return to your embodied experience and the activity of the mind as held in the context of that attention, right? Notice how much of your experience is the experience of being an embodied human, right? And also note that that embodied human is an utterly unique structure in the entire history of the universe. That particular embodied human that is telegraphing all this information to you right now. My weird thing, to a weird twist in my hip, is uniquely my weird twist in my hip. And it just expands outward from there. Your conditioned experience and the contents of your storehouse consciousness is, again, unique, utterly unique and singular. Just really get to know that singular being, that singular experience, this body, this mind, these dynamics. It's miraculous. Who knew that something like this would arise? Just to gratefully receive this experience, no matter what it is. And to bring up a kind of compassionate curiosity and lively engagement with it. If it's comfortable, appreciate the comfort. If it's uncomfortable, attend to and be gentle with the discomfort. As thoughts arise, notice them. If they take your attention, let them. When they return your attention, appreciate them. That's all. Don't be worried about reframing your posture in the middle of sitting. In some ways, the request is always to be framing your posture, as though it was the first moment you sat down. Always to bring that energy and intention to the act of sitting. And that's the actual meaning of the term shikantaza. Dogen says it's like a bell, it's like a hammer striking emptiness. Before and after, its exquisite peal, its threads sped throughout space and time. How could it be limited to this moment? I think we should walk a bit and then sit down some more. So, shouldn't everybody stand around in a circle outside the cushions? And so try unlocking your knees, rolling your pelvis forward a little bit, and allowing your back to straighten out, your head to float up over your shoulders, just like you're sitting zazen, but you're not anymore. And if you like, you can put your hands like this in shashu, and then everyone turn to the left. On the next out breath, reach forward with your left foot and plant it. Yeah, just maybe a little in front of, maybe just a little further up alongside your right foot. As you breathe out, transfer the weight to your left foot, and then as you breathe in, lift your right foot a bit and just onto the ball. You don't have to lift it all the way up. And then on the next out breath, plant that foot and repeat. Notice the way your foot spreads and holds your body up. Notice in detail the way the muscles engage as you do the transfer. All right, that's enough. Let's go back to the seat. Great. So before we move on, did anything come up in the context of Zazen or Kinhin practice? Any questions, any observations? Was it comfortable? Was it uncomfortable? Anything like that? Go ahead.
Question. A simple question. What do you do with the gaze when you're walking? The place you put your eyes, or just miss that?
Yeah. So where do you put your eyes during Kinhin? The request around the gaze is exactly the same as during Zazen. So your eyes should be down in front of you, and your gaze should be broad and inclusive, and relaxed, basically. Yeah. And here's what happens. You're walking around. What happens to me anyway. You're walking around, and you can sort of see the person in front of you, but you're not looking at them. You're just taking them in, and every now and again, I just sat this most of this 7-day retreat at San Francisco City Center, and the woman sitting just to the left of me had a whole series of these utterly unpatterned shawls in these beautiful, rich fabrics, right? And she'd be walking along in front of me, and I swear I was seeing paisley patterns and these really elaborate floral patterns, or these vine patterns going up and down her shawl and stuff like that. Because when your gaze relaxes like that, particularly if the room is a little dark, but honestly, it's totally not necessary. That stuff starts to happen, basically. It's quite funny, actually. But anyway, so yeah, it's like, woo.
Yeah, that happens when you do stuff outside. I don't remember what's walking towards a hedge.
Yeah.
The hedge is just taking on all these. Yeah.
I know, definitely.
Okay, cool. I
Yeah.
noticed when I was getting kind of like fixated. It was like a target on the horizon, and I was sort of like locked on it. And I thought, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing with my eyes.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. There's this subtle distinction between looking and seeing, right? It's possible to take in a really substantial portion of the visual field, honestly, without really looking at anything, right? So yeah, that's right. And and it's helpful because if you discover that, like a wild pig runs across your path and you're going to stumble over it, and your body goes, "Oh, a wild pig."
Does that happen?
Not during Kinhin, but there's a lot of that. If you go bike riding in the country in California, you run across a lot of wild pigs,
Yeah.
and they're fierce and they're fast, and they run right across the street in front of you. And then I don't know if you know where Parkfield is, but there's this really famous bike climb in between Coalinga and Parkfield. It's just an unbelievably beautiful thing. And I did it once by myself in the middle of a multi-day ride all the way to LA, actually. And as about 2/3 of the way up, I started noticing some sort of rustling and scuffling over to my right, and it turned out there was a huge herd of wild pigs, and they were like following me up the hill, right on the other side of the fence. I was like, okay. But they left me alone. So anyway. So anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
I get this almost every time I sit. Just like between my shoulder blades, there's almost like a bow tie of tension.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And sometimes it gets like the tension like fixates on it in weird ways where it's like I'm looking at something and it's simultaneously like I don't know, there's like pressure in the thing I'm looking at and the thing on my back or the kind of like oyster or something. I don't know, but
yeah. Well, I mean that feeling, the feeling of the tension in your sort of middle upper back, right, being complicated is just exactly because it is complicated, right? You're holding up your head and you're holding up your hands and arms, and everybody, as far as I can tell, has this tendency as they sit for this portion of their posture to contract a little bit and throw additional tension in the back. So I mean, I would say, like, just sitting here, allow your head to float up off your shoulders, allow your shoulders to drop, but lift your chest in between them a little bit. And if you do that and you sort of pay attention, you get this feeling where the flesh at the back of your neck and in between your shoulder blades sort of feels like it's falling down your back, right? And so if you do it in a really exact,
you're saying lift shoulders.
well, I'm saying pull the shoulders back, but let them fall straight down.
And this up.
And imagine that there's a column planted in your heart that's supporting your sternum, and imagine that your head is floating back up off your shoulders and is resting in some sort of balancy spot right up on top of your neck, basically. And if you work with that a bit, you'll eventually get this experience where the muscles in your middle upper back are almost completely relaxed, right? And it's probably too much work to sustain that for a long period of time, but there's a compromise there between have that particular discomfort, which I'm extremely familiar with, and having those muscles be soft enough so that they don't cause you discomfort, basically.
I can feel with this posture, which I think I've never sat with, kind of like all the muscles here being like, wait, we have to do something? But I do feel these ones slack, and that's incredible. So honestly, I was like, okay, I know I gotta have some trauma. Everyone says it's in the body. It's gotta be like two little shoulders. All right, I guess so. All right, keep looking for the trauma. It's not that, because that's fixed. Thanks.
You're welcome. What else?
I want to shake your hand.
We can do that. But so I thought I'd bring up another koan, and I think this one is case 7 in the Blue Cliff record, and it involves this Tang Dynasty Zen master named Fayan Wenyi, who was the founder of one of the 5 schools of Zen during the Tang and up through the Song Dynasty, basically. And so I'm going to, recite the koan a couple of times. And then I'm going to call on you in turn to tell me what happened in your mind when you heard it. So so just pay attention to what happens when you hear it. And it could be anything, right? But so a monk named Hui Chao asks Fayan, he says, this is Hui Chao here, and I'm asking, what's Buddha? And Fayan says, you are Hui Chao. So, what's Buddha? You are Hui Chao. So what happens?
It was like the form of a question and then an answer. So there was kind of a tension and then a release.
Yeah.
And there was also a sense of a possibility of like seeking, like an invitation to seek something, but I declined it.
Cool. That's good. Yeah, I mean the question doesn't even have to be, just the sense of a question doesn't even have to be fully formed, right? It's just that, it's just, there's a kind of blanket permission for curiosity at both the conceptual and non-conceptual levels, right? What about you?
So just to clarify, he asks what's Buddha, and he says you are, like the last word is
his name, the guy's name. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's like, yeah, what's Buddha? You're Fred. Yeah.
Like a sense of comfort to an extent. It felt it almost feels like non-paradoxical.
Yeah, that's right. It can feel it can feel like an affirmation, right? In some ways, right? Yeah, no, I think that's right. Yeah.
Sense of like an affirmation.
Yeah.
Than the average koan, which is kind of more like paradoxical.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just felt like, all right, cool. Like, I didn't feel like there was a next step to it for me. Like, it was like, oh, cool.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. What about you?
At first there was a feeling of looking inward upon asking the question, hearing that, and then looking outward with the answer.
Interesting. When you look outward, what do you take in in that moment?
A sense of awareness outside, like a growing awareness outside of the question asking.
Yeah, nice. And what about you?
When you first posed it, and the guy said, "What is Buddha?" I have previously worked with this one where the guy says, "Masan," and so I was like, "Oh, it's gonna be the Masan one," and then it wasn't, and then when he gave the other answer, "You are," I was like, "Well, of course, well, of course he's Buddha." So I was just sort of like, "Hey, well, that was an easy one." This one's not sort of like rice pan,
Right.
buckety, confusing.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the other thing that always strikes me with these is the monks the monks, like, obviously Buddhists. You think they would have that down, but they also ask, "What is Buddha?" instead of like, "Who is Buddha?"
Yeah, exactly.
You know? And it's kind of like they're like setting themselves up. They're like, give me a trick, because I'm asking you already a confusing the worded question. What is Lady Red?
Yeah, exactly. No, you're totally right. That's right. It's it would be maybe a different thing if they were, asking like, well, who's the Buddha? And somebody, well, Siddhartha Gautama lived.
Yeah. It was the prince. Yeah.
Right, exactly. There is a story. Who told this story? I think it was this woman that I was I was in a sort of study group with. I think she wrote it in her book. She studied in Korea some, and the monastery she was at, this is Korean Zen monastery, exactly that thing happened. So this guy comes in to give a talk, and he's a bit of an academic, and the monks in this place are really hardcore, right? And so he kind of starts talking in these sort of general terms about Buddhism and the Buddha and so on and so forth. And finally, this one guy jumps up at the back and he says, "What is this Buddha you're talking about?" And he does exactly that. He goes, "Well, and then the guy gives him about 3 minutes, and then he jumps up again and he says, "What is this Buddha you're talking about?" And he leaves, and the entire congregation gets up and walks out. and that was the end of the lecture. So like you can read this case in two ways, and people translate it in two ways. So in one, it's you are, comma, huichao, which is the kind of what we're saying, right? Like you're a Buddha, right? But it has another interpretation, which is the one without the comma, right? Where essentially he's saying, forget Buddha, you're a huichao, right?
Oh,
and
you're Lady Red, forget Buddha.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah. And if you dig into that, I mean, it's sort of like what I was hinting around while we were sitting, right? The thing that's remarkable about Hui Chao is that he's unique in the entire history of the universe, right? And he's a singular creation of the causes and conditions that have led up to his, birth and, and encounter with the Fayan and so on and so forth, right? It's a remarkable thing, right? And it kind of throws a light on, like Buddhism claims and I think rightly claims that there are universals in the human condition that are become clear and also kind of tractable in the presence of practice, right? And noticeable in the presence of practice. And that's a wonderful thing. But it's also worth noting that the expression of those universals in every individual is just thoroughly and completely unique. And so when Dogen, I'm going to read you a little Dogen. When Dogen was writing his he wrote essentially 2 manifestos right after he got back from China. And the first one is called Everyone Should Be Sitting Zazen, and it contains his instructions for Zazen, right? The second one is called the Bendo Wa, and which means the wholehearted way, and it's a fake Dharma talk, which I'm going to read part of, followed by a fake Q&A where he gathers together all the questions and comments and criticisms that the Buddhist establishment in Kyoto leveled at him when he got back from China, and he answers them in the most snarky, like arrogant, like just ferocious way you can possibly imagine. It's quite remarkable, actually. But I'm not going to read that part. But here's what he says. Yeah, well, sometime we could go through it. It would be really fun. I mean, it is a great document, and he says things like, even though it's said that it's useless to give sailboats to people who live way up in the mountains, I'm going to answer your question. And stuff like that. But here's what he says. He says, let me turn this phone on its side. That was a mistake too. Now, all ancestors and all Buddhas who uphold Buddha Dharma have made it the true path of enlightenment to sit upright practicing in the midst of self-fulfilling samadhi. Okay. And he says, those who attain enlightenment in India and China followed this way. It was done so because teachers and disciples personally transmitted this excellent method as the essence of the teaching. So, you can see what he's doing. This is the manifesto, right? He's basically trying to make the claim that the thing that he's about to say, or that he's in the process of saying, is the original teaching and practice of the Buddha, right? Many people have made that claim, but Dogen was one of them, right? But here's the other thing that's resting in the middle of that paragraph. What's translated here as self-fulfilling samadhi is a Japanese phrase, Jiju Zanmai, which essentially means self-receiving, employing samadhi, where Zanmai is just the cognate for samadhi, right? And so and then he says, let's see. In the authentic, tradition of our teaching, it is said that this directly transmitted, straightforward Buddha Dharma is the unsurpassable of the unsurpassable. So, self-receiving and employing samadhi is it, right? And when even for a moment you express the Buddha's seal in the three actions by sitting upright in samadhi, the whole phenomenal world becomes the Buddha's seal, and the entire sky turns into enlightenment. It's pretty good. And because of this, all Buddha Tathagatas, as the original source, increase their Dharma bliss and renew their magnificence in the awakening of the way. Okay, so now he's really kind of laying it on thick, right? But it's worth considering what that term actually means, because it's really important to him, obviously, right? Essentially, the window through which you are, the only window through which you're able to look in order to wake up is the window of the self, right? It's the window of your sensorium. It's the window of your that includes your storehouse consciousness and your pattern matching capacity and the things that you bring to the moment in each moment. All of that stuff. That's it. That's what we have to work with, basically.
And that's all you need.
Yes, it's all unique, and it's all essentially. He's saying this really radical thing. He's saying that massive sensations, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, that's unique in all the world, is actually the self, right? And what that has a couple of sort of corollaries, right? One of which is that the self in the largest definition is the entire world, right? It's just that we can only see part of ourselves in any particular moment, right? Because of the tuning of our sensory hardware, right? And our but when he says things like sitting zazen is like a hammer striking emptiness, and it essentially, lasts forever. He really means it, right? Which is kind of amazing. So,
I think I missed the hammer striking emptiness.
yeah,
Striking nothing.
yeah, right. Well, emptiness isn't nothing. Emptiness is the interdependent co-arising of all phenomena,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like love, right? It's kind of like one of those things that you can't really hit with a hammer.
That is a really good point. Again, it's a metaphor, right? but I think the underlying experience around that is there's this kind of this sort of vibratory and energetic nature of our experience that when you sit and really settle, you start to notice. It's like the whole world is ringing, right? And all the particles in your body are like, ah! Or yeah, something like that. So anyway, and so that's what you are, Hui Chao is pointing at, is self-receiving and employing samadhi, right? It's pointing at the unique position of Hui Chao in the entire universe, and the his unique connection with absolute reality, right? Which is all around us, but everybody can only see it through that window, right? So any questions about that? Go ahead.
One is that this is an embarrassingly beginner level question, so I'm going to ask it. Different people and traditions translate samadhi all sorts of different ways. So I noticed I was there kind of translating it as awareness. But I'm curious, how would you translate or define samadhi?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a Zen context, right? The definition of samadhi is pretty broad, and it's a form of concentrated absorption, basically, right?
Okay.
And people glue lots and lots of additional, adjectives, or I guess the Chinese doesn't really have, adjectives per se, because its grammar is fairly straightforward, but glue other words onto samadhi to talk about different kinds of samadhi, right?
There's Nirvikalpa samadhi, and there's
Right.
different flavors of.
Yeah.
Okay, so the samadhi itself is just an absorption.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah.
Cool. And then so this is the self-arising and self-fulfilling samadhi. So it's the absorption of experience in itself.
Of the experience of being in this unique position in the universe, in space and time now, with this particular history, right? Et cetera, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. So what other kinds could it be?
Well, so there's a famous poem written, at least attributed to Dongshan, called "Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi." So, which was also a big deal. So, the idea of the jewel mirror samadhi is that that you're it's originally from the Platform Sutra, right? So do you know about the poetry contest thing? Have you heard this story? So the fifth ancestor had a temple, and this guy named Huineng, who supposedly, although nobody really knows if this is true or not, was an illiterate woodcutter from South China, shows up at his door and says, "I want to be a monk." And he says, "Why would we take you in? You're an illiterate barbarian." And he goes, well, you know, the Diamond Sutra says everybody can wake up, so why not me? And then the teacher goes, okay, fine, you can be the rice cook. And he takes him in, and he's working in the kitchen, and finally the fifth ancestor decides he wants to retire, right? And he says, I know what I'll do. And this is one of the reasons why this is obviously not true. He says, I know what I'll do. I'll have a poetry contest. And whoever writes the best poem will be my successor. And so he puts out the word, and everybody in the we were talking about the Shuso. So everybody in the congregation says, oh, well, the Shuso is the best poet. Why don't we just have him write a poem, and then he can be the successor? And everyone's like, okay. And so he does. And he writes this poem that essentially goes, the body is a stand, is this a mind is a jewel mirror, and the body is a stand. Every day you brush the dust off, basically, right? And so everyone is really happy with that. And the fifth ancestor is like, yeah, that's pretty good, right? And so Huineng hears about this, and he goes, oh, I think I could probably do better than that. And he asks somebody who works in the kitchen who can write to, and here again is this is like crazy, right? He says, why don't we go to the abbot's quarters and we'll write this on the wall outside. They will do graffiti on the wall outside the abbot's quarters, right? And he writes this poem that goes, there's no stand and no mirror. Where's the dust going to settle at all, right? And that's and the fifth ancestor sees it and he goes, that's the guy. And I think I know who it is, right? So he calls him in late at night and curtains his abbot's quarters so nobody can look in. He says, I'm going to give you Dharma transmission, but you have to get the hell out of town because otherwise people are going to be really jealous and they're probably going to kill you, right? So and then all this other drama happens. But anyway, so that's the basis of the story, right? But the idea is that the jewel mirror reflects reality perfectly, right? And so that's the song of the jewel mirror samadhi, and it's a different way of thinking about meditative absorption, right? As a mirror, as opposed to as some kind of, I don't know, like conversation with everything or something like that, right? Yeah. Anyway, did you say you had another question as well? Yeah.
I've got a lot of questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
But you mentioned storehouse consciousness.
Yeah.
What's that?
Oh, okay. Well,
How do you work with it?
the scheme cooked up by the Abhidharmists, right? Has sensations, perceptions, the skandhas, right? And famously, Red Pine says these are usually translated as aggregates, but actually, what they really are is they're like the aerial roots in a banyan forest or something like that, right? Which is kind of great. They're like this cluster of roots, right? That through which our experience rises, which is lovely, right? Yeah, but so one of the features of that Abhidharma scheme is that they posit this essentially associative memory, right? And you throw your experience into associative memory, and out comes some sort of patterned response, right? And when the skandhas say, on the skandha that's usually called things like mental formations, or it's translated in a few different ways. that's where you're engaging your storehouse consciousness and doing pattern matching and pattern responses to your perceptions, basically. Yeah. So that's what the storehouse consciousness is, and it's a really useful idea, and it lines up with what is essentially probably the broadest and most useful definition of life, which is it's the application of memory to present circumstances in an effort to influence outcomes, basically, right? And every living thing does that pretty much, right? There's some memory mechanism, and it mediates our response, their response, our response, and that's happening on uncountable levels in every human body and mind, right?
I said, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, self-receiving and employing samadhi. And I wrote a poem about this one, so I'll read you the poem and then we can call it a night. How's that? Come on. Here we go.
I've heard of this. Is the story of consciousness the same as the eighth consciousness?
I think the eighth consciousness is impulsive consciousness, but I could be wrong about that. Actually, it's a good point. Look at that, because you might be right.
I remember Shinsen said something about one of the consciousnesses turns to the other and like receives something from it, and sometimes like rejects it, and that's like aversion.
Yeah.
But maybe it was from Yoga Chara.
Yeah. Well, no, I think the Abhidharmas had the list of consciousnesses. I just don't remember what the number is, right?
And do we throw them, or do we just kind of be like Abhidharmas, but like the only thing I remember about them is that they're totally wrong? No,
actually, I think that's I really appreciate the work that they did to try and kind of explicate or interpret or explain human subjectivity, right? I mean, that's a serious job, and honestly, hardly anyone has done a better job of it since, right? It's really a big deal to explain subjectivity, right? And in fact, it remains a complete mystery, right? But they kind of snuck up on it, right? And they did it mainly through some combination of philosophical reasoning and introspection, which is kind of cool, right? Even though Daniel Dennett says introspection is always lying to you, right? But it turns out they did an okay job, right? The thing that people started objecting to was that they thought it was all real, and they thought the job of Buddhists was to be all sciencey about it, right? And that annoyed a lot of people, and so Nagarjuna basically wrote this document that says, no, it's not like that.
No.
he really didn't say. The entire document is no, right? It's amazing. Yeah. But no, they're great. I think I still really like the kind of main thrust of that explanation or description of human subjectivity.
Got that from a snake. Now you said he wrote it.
Well, no, he got the Mahayana sutras from a snake, but he wrote this no document himself, right? Okay. Sorry. So so I'll read the poem. So morning entering the room through a half-open window, grace enough for a lifetime of lifetimes. Picking up the fragments one by one, holding them to feel the weight and to divine their fit, And the errors, oh, those errors. They say the Buddhists have more than 50 words for error. Random patches of dark and light on the floor under my feet resolve into a landscape. Distant mountains range to the west, massive sunset clouds above. Anyway, so that's the poem I wrote for this particular case. I'm still working on it. Or I'm working on writing a poem for every case in the Blue Cliff record, and it'll be decades before I'm done. So thank you really a lot.